which is essentially political interference in pensions. Now, how many of you in this room, if you could put up your hands, draws CPP now? Okay, and how many of you contribute to CPP now? Okay, so most of you. No big surprise there. So my remarks are really going to focus on why we should be concerned about the UCP's plan to bring the Canada Pension Plan back to Alberta, withdraw the funds, and operate it in Alberta exclusively for Albertans. And it was a very deliberate, there's a lot of history to it, which I won't go into, but these slides, I'll make sure that you have access to them. And some of these slides, some of the points have hyperlinks. There was a very sophisticated campaign that was set up in September 2023, led by Jim Dinning, essentially, who changed his mind about having an Alberta pension plan versus a Canada pension plan. He was instrumental in developing this communications plan, and it's very sophisticated. And it really focuses on benefits for people based on the fallacy that Alberta was entitled to 53% of the total assets of the Canada Pension Plan. Ludicrous. But they had now a TELUS subsidiary, LifeWorks, do the work for $1.3 million, and that's your money. Now you can carry on, Jill, with some of the others. So Jim was the chair, Mary Ritchie, carry on. Mary Ritchie, again, a good conservative person. Moynihan Yaha, he was on the Fair Deal panel, which Jason Kenney set up, and a real hawk for provincial rights. I and others have tried to get information from the government through Freedom of Information requests on what was the bureaucracy saying? Were they recommending this? And I must say I was very disappointed that most of the information was redacted. So we're paying public servants more than a living wage to work on our behalf, and we get nothing. It's a real big issue, and I know several of you, including Ali, made comments about that as well. Now, the danger of politicizing pensions. So this is a letter from, or an article by Kelly Kreiderman, opinion writer for the Globe and Mail, and she's no fan of politicizing pensions. So next slide, please. So here are my conclusions. Don't believe what campaigning politicians say. Danielle Smith said we're not going to touch pensions. Well, when they introduced this idea of an Alberta pension, it was decidedly not inconsistent with her saying we're not going to touch pensions. The UCP all of a sudden discovered when they got into power in 2019 that pensions were a source potentially with enough subtle nuance hints to the Alberta Investment Management Corporation to invest in oil and gas. And they took out all the teachers' money and put it into AIMCO. They eliminated the monopoly. They restored the monopoly that AIMCO had for all public pensions. The NDP in their last year of office threw it open to a potential, the funds and the pension boards deciding on their own, is AIMCO doing a good job? And like every other private sector plan, go and find somebody else that can manage the funds better. But a key piece of this was nobody was consulted. Nobody was even given notice before Bill 22 went in. So next bullet point. Yeah, so there's one of the things about the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board is that you have a separation of what I call church and state. So there is no, by legislation, by statute, the government cannot give directions to the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board to do its bidding, i.e. to invest in certain industries. Next bullet point, please. And this, to me at least, is creating your own pension plan or taking the money out is like Quebec Inc. And what we have is what I call Alberta LLP, and that includes such things as having a Alberta sheriffs ruling the roost and other disturbing developments. Next slide, please. Oh, so if it's too good to be true, it isn't. And that's just the whole idea about $334 billion coming to Alberta. It just doesn't make sense. And the other provinces don't want that to happen either. So the dangers of withdrawing from the Alberta pension plan is that it means that you can't go back into the Canada pension plan, and it doesn't matter who's in power. There is a temptation to manipulate the investment policies for political gain, and that's not a very good thing. Next bullet. As I said before, this $334 billion number is really delusional. The survey that was done, I answered it 3 times, so I don't know how effective that could be. We still don't know really the results. Charles Rusnell, on one of my earlier slides for the TIE, did some work, and the calls into Danielle Smith's office after this announcement in September 23 were about 75% against it. And now AIMCO, the Alberta Investment Management Corporation, which was set up with grand plans in 2008 to do wonders and to do better than the bureaucratic group in Alberta Treasury, its investment record is rather spotty. And I have a few points to that as well. Just in relation to what we're trying to do here, you can write to the Premier, but as I think Ali said, we're not always being heard, or we're not always getting answers back. But you can certainly do that. So on the political interference, as I said, and I won't repeat, but the board is insulated from political interference. The UCP record and the Alberta Pension Protection Act, an Orwellian piece of language, if there ever was one, is not guaranteeing the same kind of structure, which is dividing the investment manager, insulating the investment manager from political interference. And now the next one is a clip that Jill will play here. Okay. Well, let me paraphrase. Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
It could be a game changer for the financial sector in this province to have that kind of weight in investment markets, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And that to not bring this forward, to have it discussed among Albertans, I think would be a missed opportunity.
So that's Jim Dinning, who was the former treasurer under Ralph Klein. And Jim is still a very credible person, especially in the Calgary business community. But what he was hinting at, and what I'm taking from that, is that the Calgary investment management and investment banking industry, who really doesn't work for you, they work for themselves, would be very happy to take 100 billion or 300 billion and flow through private investment management companies. And because AIMCO is just so bloodied, and AIMCO's record is so awful, which I will talk about in the next slide. These are the record on pensions, and to indicate or to back up a little bit, the UCP did not talk about pensions at all when they ran in 2019, and now when they came into power, they saw this investment pool as a vehicle to advance really the interests of the energy industry. Next slide. Okay, so why? Well, first of all, we had very low oil prices, so there was a bad situation in the industry, more environmental concerns, the banking industry not as willing to lend money to the oil patch. There was a program that the NDP put in, much to their, I think, later regret, which created the Alberta growth mandate, and it said that the government wanted AIMCO to invest in companies with the growth prospects in Alberta in 2015. Well, guess what? Two-thirds of the investments were to struggling oil and gas and oil servicing companies. Unbelievable, unbelievable. And a number of them went bankrupt, as Mark knows. Trident was one. We had this perpetual Sequoia rubellite thing with really a very sketchy history, where company assets were sold from Perpetual into Sequoia, and then they were milked for a few years and went bankrupt. And then we have Western Energy Services, which is also in some kind of restructuring agreement with AIMCO right now. Next slide. This is just the big lie on this is the audacity of both officials and ministers in writing comments in the annual report of the Heritage Fund. So what they were saying is the UCP comes in, okay, we're disassociating ourselves with the Alberta growth mandate. And the claim was the mandate was eliminated as it was no longer necessary. The mandate, all investments exceeded AIMCO's risk return targets. Now, it kind of boggles the mind. Is bankruptcy your risk return goal? And again, very little accountability. That was written, that is in print. You can look at that in the 1920 annual report. And then followed shortly thereafter was the big blunder on volatility trading strategies, which is just a way to make some money when the markets are smooth, which is usually the case, but they can go badly wrong. And they lost about $2 billion Heritage Fund money as well as pension fund money. And now they're in arbitration, some of the big pension plans like local authorities pension plan against the government and AIMCO. Now, one area I think of hope is that the MP for Edmonton Strathcona, Heather McPherson, tabled a private member's bill. And basically what Heather is saying is we need to have, if you want to withdraw from the plan, it shouldn't be only the federal minister responsible in cabinet acceding to the withdrawal, but all the other provinces representing 2/3 of the population and so forth. That amending formula should be consulted. Now, whether that goes ahead or not, I wrote a letter to Freeland, and that came back to me. It wasn't open, so I don't know when I'm going to get an answer from Freeland. But again, there are very powerful forces, as I talked about Jim Dinning and his quote about, we want to be a new international financial sector. Those are powerful forces within the UCP. Now, people ask me, well, what do you think is going to happen? We are going to have a chief actuary's report that'll probably come out in the next 6 weeks. That number, it was not going to be 330 billion. It's probably going to be 120 billion. I think the Premier realizes that this is not a winner electorally, but I'm concerned that, like others have said today, and I agree, they don't listen. So I really urge you to work as diligently as you can. You can go to AbPolyCon, my blog site. There's lots of articles about the APP, and write to the ministers and express your distaste for this very foolish move. Thank you very much.